Welcome to Synchronicity. I've been derelict in my duty to get podcasts out. Sorry about that. It's the summer. I've been traveling. I am back. For those who have been craving more of this, whatever this is, you can go on the Patreon. I do post there regularly. We're getting at least a couple bonus episodes out over the summer every month. We're doing the Mystic of the Month. That should be out either this weekend or Monday. It is going to be Sri Ramakrishna. We did Milarepa last month, and we'll continue that series throughout the summer. So you can check all that stuff out. There is stuff going on. We have a live stream tonight. It's Thursday. So you can check that out as well. Those are free for anyone to watch. It's twitch.com. Is it twitch.tv/syncpod, SYNC. Anyone can watch those. If you want to watch the replays, you got to become a patron. That's the way it works. But I am happy to be back. I am sorry it's been over a month since I recorded one of these, but it's just the way it goes. Had a good time in Turkey. I'm heading back there in a few weeks, and I will be on the boat, so I don't know how many of these will get out, but I will record a few of them before I go, so at least there'll be some stuff. So I appreciate the patience. I have not retired. I've seen there have been reviews of the podcast. By the way, rate and review on Apple Podcasts, where people are like, this was a great podcast until he retired. I did not retire. I just took extended breaks for various reasons at various times. So we got a fun episode today. There's no real plan for it, but I did want to talk about a few things. We're going to call this one the Snapback, because I think this is like the energy of 2024. I've alluded to it and explicitly spoken about it a while before 2024. And I think so far it's lining up to be exactly what I was anticipating and kind of intuiting about what this year was going to be about. So this year, for the most part, is one of oscillations. It's one of ups and downs. There is progress, and then there's a little bit of going backwards. And that's very normal in an ascension process. And to be clear, that is what I think is happening right now. I think a lot of us individually and collectively are leveling up in significant ways. And when we think of leveling up, we typically think of it as like a straight line kind of process, right? We're going up. That's what it is. Things are just going to get better and better. And overall, that is what happens, right? As our awareness grows, we do have a more rich and deeper experience of being alive, which is pretty cool. But there's a lot of other stuff that comes with it. More awareness means you're more aware of everything. And we live in a world of duality, so we get good and bad. We get light and dark. And that's just the natural part of the process. I think for me personally, I have been doing this podcast almost 10 years now. And so you can hear at various points where I am kind of mentally, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally. And, it's not always just, locked in a super flow state. I admire people who seemingly can stay in that state forever. I don't think many people can. It's one of the reasons I enjoy reading about mystics and people who have achieved some level of enlightenment and kind of click in and stay in that state. But it's also, that's a big state of separation. You're not really the same as everyone else when you kind of go to the point of just being in samadhi or nirvana, and that's where you're living. And because most people aren't on that wavelength, and that's how you connect with people, is by resonating as the same frequencies as them. So there's a lot of stuff we can do to kind of help ourselves get to that point as we're, going on this fun little journey, eh? But I don't know why I just turned Canadian for a second. But today I thought it would be interesting to talk about kind of what I'm calling the snapback effect. And this is when you kind of hit a crucial pivot point where you do level up significantly, and it's palpable and you can see it. And maybe the day before you recognize that you were a completely different person, and you've kind of really, you've gotten like a reward or a trophy or, some type of achievement that is showing you that you have leveled up. What can happen after that, and it's quite common, is you really then go down from that elevated state, and things kind of like get challenging and chaotic. And that can be very like disorienting, because you feel and you know you've made a tremendous amount of progress, and then here you are kind of in a low energy, potentially depressed state. And that can be very difficult to deal with, because you think you've made so much progress, you feel like you've really come so far, and yet here you are kind of in a low energetic state. And that's just normal. I want to be very clear about that. If you react negatively to that and you feel as though you've done something wrong, that can be counterproductive. And you know it's counterproductive because you kind of learned more and you understand more rules of the game of life. So this also comes into play, and it's something I've really been thinking about dealing with, kind of integrating is probably the best word for it, is, as your awareness increases and you become more aware of the impact of your emotions and thoughts relative to what happens in your life and how you are creating your own reality. When you notice that you're in a state that is maybe not aligned with what your desires are, or what you aspire to be or achieve in the world, it can be especially difficult, because then you have this knowledge that like you are creating something that maybe you don't want to experience. And this is different than before you kind of recognize and wake up to the fact that your imagination is God and it creates reality and all of this fun stuff, because you kind of recognize your potentially, I don't want to use the word negative, but you're impacting the way you experience life and the outpicturing of your reality in a way that isn't pleasant. It isn't what you want. So you have this double whammy of like not feeling great, but also knowing that because you don't feel great, you're perpetuating that state. And that's difficult, right? It's almost better to be completely unaware that your emotional state is creating your reality, because then you just like can blame it on random chance or life is hard and whatever else is going on, what other circumstances or relationships that are impacting the way your life is. That you're kind of the creator of your reality. And that's a difficult place. And I think one of the things that we can do to help alleviate that or provide some type of healing tonic is really connecting with other people. It becomes more and more clear to me as I go on. I'm going to be 41 in July. I've lived a decent amount of life. I'm not elderly yet, but that means to Generation Z, I'm probably elderly. But, as you go on, you realize like, you're not trying to eliminate all of the bad, right? You're not trying to only be in a state of happiness and joy. Of course, that is a wonderful place to be. Stay there as long as it feels good and you like it, but also recognize you've come into a world of death, mortality, sickness, despair, melancholy, sadness, did I say? All of these things are there as well. And my conception of reality and how we've come to be here is that it is a choice on a deep level. We're not thrust into existence willy-nilly just for no reason. If you believe that, it's hard for me to believe you'd be listening to this podcast at this point, but that's not what I think happens. I think we do make, on some level, a conscious decision to incarnate in this realm. And that means you incarnate in a realm with a lot of different things going on. It is not just a game of, hey, we're going to be in utopia. Everything is going to be wonderful all the time. Yes, you create your own heaven and hell based on your thoughts, your feelings. That's true. But we're here for a lot of stuff, right? We know essentially being alive is the process of dying, right? You're living to die. You will die. Everyone you love will die. I don't say this to be bleak or scary. It should give you some sense of like, this life is important. And I've said this before, and I truly believe it, that life is inherently meaningless. Doesn't mean that there's no point to it. It just means that you're the person ultimately who gives your life meaning, who gives your universe and your world meaning. So that should have some, it should strike a chord in you in some way to remind you that you're the one kind of running this show in your world. It doesn't mean other people don't exist. It doesn't mean that you are God and you're the only God of reality. It means you're the God of your reality, and your perceptions have a tremendous impact on what goes on. Right? That's just important to remember. Something that's been really interesting to me is seeing how people react to like wars and global conflicts. And I've spoken about this more on the Patreon. I've learned to kind of gate my opinions when they're publicly, because I've been flamed for them too many times. But, you know, if you're looking at a global conflict, right, something where there's just objectively terrible shit going on and it's not great, and you truly believe as you're watching it and perceiving it that this is a horrible thing, and how could these people be doing that, or how could those people be doing this, you have to remember that your perception of reality either concretizes it or dissolves it, right? So if you are putting out that this is the worst thing ever and it's never going to get better, that creates the conditions for that situation to be perpetuated. Now, this isn't ostriching yourself and sticking your head in the sand and pretending that there is no global conflict and there's no bad things going on in the world. That's not what I'm saying. And it's also not saying you should be firmly indifferent to what's going on, but trying to exercise a level of non-judgment or holding the space that things are getting better, or at least have the potential to, you'd be surprised how that really can impact what is actually going on. And then when you kind of amplify that through collective belief, you really start working with some good stuff there, right? So I just want to keep that in mind. It is very easy to be extremely judgmental. It is very easy to kind of cast blame and look at situations in a negative light. You're going to have ample opportunities to do that throughout your entire life, in your own personal relationships, in broader collective situations. I know it's easier said than done. I am not holding myself up as someone who, exercises non-judgment continuously. I can be very judgy. I just also know that the impact and the effects of judgment can be very self-destructive, right? In capital S, big self-destructive. And I just point that out because it's clear that the divisions that exist, whether it's political divisions, cultural divisions, gender division, whatever it is, there's a lot of them right now. And this is what happens when a reality fractures and uncertainty begins to keep in. People kind of naturally cling or create identities for themselves because it gives them a sense of security. It may be a false sense of security, but that's what it does. And that's why people try to, create identities for themselves or align themselves with certain identities. And again, I don't know that that's the most beneficial thing we can be doing for ourselves as individuals, let alone as a society and a culture. So again, just try to keep in mind that if you have a tendency to be very judgmental of others and yourself, which are always intimately linked, if you see a very judgmental person, or if you yourself are a very judgmental person when it comes to others, you're also more than likely extending that judgment to yourself, which can be very difficult. So the point is can you remember that everything is good, even when it seems like it's not? Can you remember that you do have some degree of control of at least your perceptions, right? It may not feel like you have control over your emotions all the time or your thoughts. We all have intrusive thoughts. You're driving down, there's a bridge, you're like, what would happen if I just drove off this bridge? Everyone has these weird intrusive thoughts at points. But can you remember that you also have the ability to kind of take a step back from that? It's one of the reasons I think cannabis has become more and more popular in the past few decades, and also more accepted, is because I've said this, since the podcast started. What I've noticed with cannabis is that it brings whatever subconscious material is lurking below the surface up. And if there is trauma, if there is judgment, if there is fear, doubt, shame, that will also come up. Now, if you react to that immediately, it will turn in a negative way and try to push it away or fight it or not deal with it. It turns into paranoia, and it can turn into extreme fear, which is why a lot of people don't like cannabis. It just doesn't feel good when you're doing something that's supposed to be like make you feel good, and the opposite things happen. But it also gives you an opportunity to deal with that material in a compassionate way, right? I do believe the consciousness that comes from cannabis, it is a female part of the plant that we ingest or inhale or imbibe or whatever, however the kids are doing it these days. It gives you a softer edge in terms of how you want to deal with the material in your psyche. And that's very powerful if you allow it to be. It's why some people really view cannabis as a plant ally. And it can very much help. This is not like an ad for weed, but it can very much help you deal with stuff that's maybe a little bit hidden from your normal waking conscious perspective. That's good. That's something that we should all be looking to do. We know there is stuff going on inside of us that we are not aware of, right? And sometimes it comes out at very inopportune times. Sometimes it comes out and you had no idea it was there. But that's what's happening, especially this year. And I think it will continue, probably for the rest of our lives. But we're in this weird, I don't know, let's call it a 2 to 3 year transition period here. I think 2027 is going to be a big pivot point. Think of it like 2012, one of those like big dramatic shift years. But we're getting this opportunity to deal with all of this stuff that's coming up. And if you can exercise self-compassion, it naturally turns into outward empathy, sympathy, and compassion. And that's really what we're trying to get at, right? God is love. Whatever you refer to as a higher power, that's ultimately what it's made of. I think that's why when people really have deep mystical experiences, they get that state of unconditional love, and they can recognize it as a supportive kind of pillar or foundation of all that we experience. And when we're out of alignment with that, it feels like just the opposite, that this world is a bleak, meaningless, hollow place filled with evil souls who, are lost and misguided. And it's not a great place to be psychologically and emotionally, and it can perpetuate a state of really not feeling great in the world. And that's a shame because, as we know, if that's what you're carrying around and those are the narratives and stories you're telling yourself, your world will likely reflect that for a long time until you can recognize it can be changed. It's changed. It's also one of the reasons why when some people hear about manifestation or imaginal techniques, they're very skeptical and just maybe outright doubting that can happen. I also think, something that's happened with kind of the new age or spiritual realm in the past 5-10 years is that manifestation is typically viewed about like, how do we get things? How do we get an experience, or like what can we physically get out of being able to manifest something, even if it's a person, like a significant person you're trying to be in a relationship with. That's typically, I think, what a lot of people hear when you talk about manifestation. Really what I've come to learn through trial and error is that the most tactful and skillful way of using manifestation techniques is for emotional states, what I would refer to as meta emotional states. So these are things like joy, generosity, peace, tranquility, equanimity. Those things, if you make those the target of your imagination, you're going to have wonderful things fill in the blanks. You don't have to be so specific about, I want this specific thing because that's the thing that's going to make me happy. This is also one of the reasons that I kind of differ from, Buddhism and some of the other, like something like Advaita Vedanta, which is kind of saying, don't have desires. Don't allow yourself to be swayed by the illusory world and think that something tangible is going to alleviate your suffering, which I do agree with. That's probably not going to happen, but it is a valid path, desire, because when you achieve something or get something that you thought was going to cure all of your ills and it doesn't, that's a very powerful experience. It's one of the best ways that we can learn anything, right? It's through trial and error. So I do view it as a valid path, but it comes with the caveat that, be open to being wrong. There's a real problem in the world today with, people don't want to be wrong. It's a horrible thing to be wrong. You need to be right. You can't be on the losing side. You need to be right about everything. And that's just not, you're never going to be right about everything. So be willing to change your mind, be open to other perspectives, be willing to acknowledge that you've been incorrect without self-flagellation. You don't need to be hard on yourself if you haven't been correct, but be forgiving. Forgiveness, another one that super important as we walk this path, right? Forgiveness, surrender, being able to let go of perceived wrongs or limitations. Those are very powerful things. That's how you kind of truly level up in a powerful way. And then again, if the outcome isn't achieved that you have been targeting with your imagination, don't despair. Don't think that because you've imposed an artificial timeline on something and your imaginal act didn't conform to that, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. So many people will, do some powerful techniques and pray and all of these things for something miraculous, and then it doesn't happen in the time frame they wanted it to happen on, and they stop and they give up. And that's like letting a plant that you were watering and taking care of kind of wither and die. You've given up on it. It can't survive. It needs your kind of at least subtle attention on from a subconscious level. I read something that Mitch Horowitz said recently that really made a lot of sense and I thought was extremely poignant, which is when there's an authentic wish or desire, an authentic one that really resonates with you on your core, it has no choice but to manifest. It has no choice but to show up. It can't not show up, essentially. And that's where we try to figure out, what is an authentic wish? What are those things that really make our soul sing, that we really can, feel the authenticity and power behind a desire? Those are the ones that are worth focusing on. Tangible material things, it's not far be it from me to tell anyone that you shouldn't go after something material. I don't think that's the correct approach either. I think for a lot of people that can be a huge catalyst to show that this does work, that these things do have real concrete power, but it's also something that you have to empirically test yourself. It's one of the first things I spoke about when I started yakking about all this imaginal stuff is don't take my word for it. Don't take anyone's word for it. That's the worst thing you can do. But you can test and practice this stuff to see if it works, right? That's the only way to prove to yourself that something works or doesn't work. If you're just blindly blind faith is not to be trusted, right? Again, faith, loyalty to the unseen world, blind loyalty to the unseen world is a recipe for disaster more often than not, because you're just kind of going any which way without a compass or any idea of where you're going. You're not looking at the stars to kind of guide you in a direction that aligns with what your true authentic desires are. So that's what we're kind of dealing with this year. There's just so much uncertainty. There's so much rapid change. We can see it. We can feel it. We also see these systems before our eyes every day crumbling, just absolutely crumbling. And everyone has an opinion on why it's happening and what's going to happen and what we can do about it and what we should be doing about it. And that's not for anyone else to tell you. That's for you to figure out what the fuck is going on and what you're going to do about it. All I can say is it's likely this year especially you've made incredible strides, truly have leveled up in a way that you probably don't fully realize yet. I'm here to tell you that's the case. But please, if you go into a state of kind of low energy or just not feeling like you've been able to maintain that change and the catalyst only got you so far, that's also not what's going on. You're actually continually making tremendous progress on your path. That absolutely is happening. So just like take it as it comes. Learn how to let things pass through you. Learn how to let emotions, feelings, thoughts, relationships feel their weight, feel their power, feel their energy, but don't think that they are somehow permanently affecting you. Everything is transient here, right? The moment of the now is forever fleeting. It's gone. Boom, look, it just left. Boom, just left. So don't try to cling to that, but you can do some things to alter your perception in time. And I'll give this tip for people because it's been coming up a lot. Been seeing questions about it. If you just can't do it, if you just can't get yourself into the state of belief, right? The revision technique is one of the most powerful tools you have in your arsenal, right? Going back and revising situations, it doesn't even have to be a specific thing, really can loosen the shackles of your current state of being. And if it's a current state of being that is not pleasant to you, or you know you don't want to be in anymore, this is a wonderful thing you can do. And I've mentioned this before, I don't know how many years ago, but one of the best techniques that I could recommend for this time right now is go back to when you were about 5 years old, right? Imagine in your mind's eye, you as a 5-year-old. You're seeing yourself from your perspective, and you're there with your 5-year-old self. And go up, lean in, and give yourself a big hug and tell yourself that I love you. I love you so much. You're doing great. You're going to do great. Things are amazing. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. You are loved. You are supported. And really feel the power of that situation. And when you're ready, you can pull yourself out of it, allow yourself to come back to the present moment, and just see how things change in the coming days and weeks, and see if there's a change in how you perceive things. If you are someone who hears about these techniques or hears about the power of your imagination or prayer or any of that stuff, but you have a hard time believing it, try to go back to an earlier state when you were a child. I mean, one of the benefits I've noticed of having children, I've had young children for quite some time now, is that they're much more open to things. They're not going to be naturally closed off to something someone is telling them or they discover. So that's kind of the mindset we'd like to be moving into to the best of our ability, right? Have that childlike innocence and naivete almost to like really believe anything that you're feeding to yourself. This also requires you to have like a decent level of trust in yourself. A lot of people don't trust themselves. A lot of people give themselves a very hard time because of real or imagined mistakes or faults or errors that they've made in their life. And that's fine. You may have fucked up a lot. God knows I have, and most people, if not everyone, has fucked up at some point. But you don't need to cling to that and think you're a bad person. Imaginal techniques, all of these things, manifestation, will not work if you don't trust and believe in yourself. That's a prereq for all of this. So if you're trying to just rush in and do this stuff, but you're holding on to these ideas and conceptions that you're not a good person, or you can't do this, or you don't know if you can do this, you're uncertain about it, it's just going to make it that much harder to kind of click in to a belief system where this is something you naturally do. Also, get familiar with the ebbs and flows, the waking up and going back to sleep. You can hear in this podcast, like I said, it's almost been 10 years. You will hear in my tone of voice, you will hear the things that I'm saying where I'm relatively more awake or more asleep, relatively more in flow or more completely out of sorts and flailing. You just have to accept that's a natural process of life. It's a growing up, it's a maturation process. It has nothing really to do with age. It has something to do with age, but it's more about kind of where you are and just in your development and readiness to accept kind of the wisdom that is innate in your being. One other thing that I wanted to mention is that, I've been noticing the pull and lure of digital media it's like trying to fight a dam that has broken and is busted out and is just flooding an entire kind of village. try to read some books. And I love audiobooks too, but try to get an actual book. One thing that I'm going to start doing on the Patreon is doing a book club of sorts. Whether we meet and discuss the book, I don't know. We'll see. But just getting a physical book, it does something to your mind when you're flipping the pages and focusing on something for, significant stretches of time. I think it's one of the best things you can do right now to kind of counter the vibes of what social media and digital media does to people's minds. It's very hard. I see this with my 5-year-old. It just shortens your attention span so much to the point where trying to consistently do something becomes incredibly challenging, to the point where it's almost impossible. So anything you can do that puts you in a state of focus for extended periods of time, I highly recommend. It's like exercising for your mind and your attention span. And I just think it's going to be easier to get stuff done. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do any of this stuff. It's just these are things that I've learned and have witnessed being very beneficial in my own life. And I've also can use the counter when I'm really not feeling great, when I'm feeling depressed, when I'm feeling kind of anxious and out of sorts and fearful, or extreme amounts of shame. I take a look at what activities I'm engaging in. How am I eating? Am I moving enough? Am I doom scrolling constantly? Am I telling myself narratives? I can't do this, or this won't work because of that, or this. Just pay attention to those things. You always have the ability to kind of gather the data points that are going on in your life and use them in a way that serves you rather than hinders you. And that's a big part of, I think, the leveling up process that's going on. I had a question from someone on the Patreon about the Schumann resonance, the solar energy that goes. And I know last week, it might have been the 24th, so it might have been even earlier this week, there was this massive blast. And it's not something I completely tune into all the time, but there was this massive blast of energy, and then it went black for nothing for a significant chunk of time. That to me is a timeline jump. That to me is a collective timeline jump. So you may have noticed that when you wake up one day, you feel completely different for no discernible reason than the previous day. Pay attention to that. We are jumping timelines, hopping through dimensions pretty regularly these days. That goes for us as individuals and collectively as kind of a global civilization. Take it to heart. There's going to be these oscillations this year. If you're familiar with what a sine wave looks like, and it's like a compressed sine wave. It's going pretty fast, up and down, which has the ability to make things seem very disorienting. So just give yourself a break if that's what's been going on. Be gentle with yourself. First, be gentle with yourself. It's wonderful to be gentle with others. It's wonderful to have patience and compassion for other people. Please start with yourself. It may sound selfish. It may sound, careless or indifferent to other people. It's not. You have to put your own oxygen mask on first. It's one of the reasons we see in the protests that are happening, around the country and the world. You're claiming and advocating for peace in the most harsh, violent terms. There's a schism there where if you don't work on yourself and have that kind of stability and equanimity in your own mind, being able to communicate that to anyone else is virtually impossible. So just take the time to cultivate some sense of inner peace and give yourself a break when you fail to hit your mark. That's just that's all I can say. And again, the goal is not to eliminate all of the bad in the world and be in a permanent state of happiness. It may feel like that sometimes. It's to have or cultivate the type of mind that gets through any situation regardless of what's going on, irrespective of conditions and circumstances and things like that. It's being able to deal with whatever the fuck happens in life, because lots of shit is going to happen that's not pleasant, and that shouldn't be some scary, bleak truth. It's just, have you been alive? That's what happens. And then when you can do that, you'd be surprised how much better it feels when wonderful things happen, and how proud of yourself you can be when a challenging or chaotic situation happens and you are graceful and move through it in a way that you really can be proud of. That's an important thing. And I know that this isn't easy, right? We've chose to incarnate in such a wild and weird time where things are moving so quickly that it's almost impossible to process in real time. But we do have the ability every night, every day, to find some time for ourselves, to cultivate the type of mind and to be the type of person we truly feel ourselves to be. And that's all we can do, because collectively when that happens, then this place starts to feel a whole hell of a lot better. It ceases to feel like this hellish landscape that no one can escape from. It truly becomes more like heaven on earth. And I think that's what we're all trying to work for. Again, the process we're going through is the remembrance and the realization that we are God, that we absolutely are. That's what the Jesus Christ thing is. It's resurrecting and waking up to the true nature of your being. That's awesome. That's amazing. But when you're not in that state, don't think you're some small little insignificant speck of dust. That whole kind of, perspective, biologists and, modern science will give you is how insignificant you are. I don't believe that. If you've experienced your own consciousness and your own ability to kind of process things in your life, you wouldn't make the judgment that you're meaningless or you have no power. You are far more powerful than you can possibly imagine. There's a wonderful quote by Swami Vivekananda, which is like, it's we who have put our hands over our eyes and exclaim that we can't see. We're doing it. So take your hands away from your eyes, put them wherever you like. I've got a dirty mind. And then just, recognize what the fuck is going on. We're doing great. We are still on the best timeline. I can promise you that. And I can also promise you that even after life, when death comes for us, it will still be fucking amazing. And we'll probably wake up from the dream and be like, holy shit, what a fucking trip. Should we do it again? And then you have a whole other choice to make. But again, there's just a lot of stuff going on. And if you notice yourself kind of moving up and down constantly, it's all good. It's the snapback effect. That's just what happens. You can actually look at chaos in your life as a sign of progress. I know that sounds wrong, and this is a warning I used to give more vehemently when I first started talking about all this stuff, is that when you imagine a completely different version of yourself in your life, to think that the conditions and circumstances and relationships of your current life are going to remain completely intact is delulu, as the kids would say. It's just not possible. You will be a different person. Your life will be a different thing. Embrace that. So as the chaos and the tower moments kind of cascade onto you, just recognize that's a sign of progress. You are not doing anything wrong. I can promise you that. You're doing fucking fantastic. Anyway, that's what's going on. Like I said, we're having a live stream tonight. You can tune in. It's going to be astrology focused. So if you want to have a chart reading for free, you can get in touch on the Patreon, send me a message, and I will put in your data and we will do it live. Really been getting back into astrology. You can book an astrology session if you would like on the website, syncpodcast.com. Those are open. It'll probably remain open until the middle of July before I go to Turkey. It's just going to be harder to do them abroad. So if you're interested in that, you can do it. For people who've been asking about the coaching sessions, they are closed right now, right? I will be opening them back up in the fall if you're interested. I don't think I'm going to take on more than like 3, maybe 4 clients or each time. I think that's the appropriate amount. And yeah, there's some other thing cooking in the kettle. No, it's not where you cook stuff. In the pot, in the pan. I don't know. There's stuff going on. You can join the Patreon if you like their ear. There are weekly readings that we do there, monthly live streams, the Mystic of the Month, bonus episodes, and some other fun stuff that is going on. I'm going to be working on some music the next couple of weeks, and I will schedule some guests so you don't just have to hear my voice when we're doing this. Apologies for the extended break. That's what happens, but I'm happy to be back. I hope you are having a wonderful summer. Please, tell everyone in your life who you love that you love them. Tell yourself that you love yourself. Things are going to be A-okay. All right. Lots of love. Bye-bye.